Okay, deduplication. This is the money saver right here. How many people here have servers that are challenged for storage space? File servers in particular, or archive servers. And the rest of you liars. Because pretty much everyone does. It's a nightmare. You know, you just have these file servers and you just can't get rid of the data. And you know that if you did some sort of in-depth analysis, there's probably God knows how much of the same file stored over and over and over. Think about it. People have limited size mailboxes. So they take big files that they've got in their inbox and they store them on their home drive. Where's the home drive? On a file server. How many folders are on in the volume? Probably 250 users, 250 shared folders. How many of them are storing the same files? Lots of them, or similar files. Even get down to the lower level, down to the 64K block level. How many of those 64K blocks are identical? Lots of them. And this is consuming disk. Whether you're doing storage spaces or not, it's just consuming money. And it's a challenge. And I've certainly seen this in the past, even in large companies, 800 odd users in Dublin, and they're struggling with storage space. Wouldn't it be nice to check a box and go and get all those pains to go away? You can, thanks to Windows Server 2012. Deduplication is a checkbox away. It will dedupe the data on your non-system drives if the data is at rest. This means it will dedupe things like file servers, archive servers, servers that are providing volumes or shares for backup. So you're backing up to an NTFS volume, for example. Greatly reduces the amount of space being consumed. There's some metrics that Microsoft have shared about the various types of services that they are deduping in MSIT. I think file servers was about 50%-ish, archive servers 80%. A large private cloud running virtual machine manager. And you've got this of virtual hard disks that are pretty much fairly identical. A couple of bits here and there that might be different. And they're all consuming lots of space. If you could deduplicate those, so you're only consuming a fraction of that space, you can save a lot of money. It's not for active files. This is not for your Hyper-V VMs. This is not for your databases or your Exchange servers or anything like that. This is for at-rest files. By default, the files will be at rest for 5 days. You'll see how easy that is to change. So if it sees a file that's been at rest for 5 days and it's running the dedupe job, it will dedupe it once it hits 5 days. And the optimization runs on a scheduled basis. By default, it's twice a day. You can actually run it on demand as well if you want. So, nothing like showing a demo of dedupe. So what I'm going to do is go back to that virtual iSCSI server that I was dealing with earlier. And there is the two-way mirror that we created earlier on. What I will do is back in here, Server Manager, Volumes, and E drive, right click, configure data deduplication. And I will enable data deduplication. By default, it will dedupe files that haven't changed in 5 days. For demo purposes, I'm going to set that to 0 days. If I want, I can exclude specific types of files. So maybe I know there's MDF files that are being used. Don't dedupe them. Maybe I want to exclude particular folders. So I know that I've got SQL servers in particular folders. Don't dedupe them. And we can set our dedupe schedule. So enable background optimization. When will it run? And there's the schedule stuff. You can tweak that to your heart's content. By default, it's doing 9 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. Maybe you'd want that at 1 p.m. and 8 p.m. It's pretty much up to you. I'm going to say OK, OK. Now I have dedupe. I didn't have to pay some storage vendor an extra 10 grand for a license. I have dedupe on my file server. Who would not want that? Seriously. If you have a legacy server right now you're struggling with and you want to see how well this dedupe will work, in the system32 folder of this particular machine, you will find a tool called ddp eval.exe. You can run it from a Windows 7, it could be Windows Vista, I'd have to double check, but definitely Windows 7 or later machine, and you can point it at file shares. So maybe you've got a 2003 file server, and you'd like to see how much space you can save on your file shares. Point it at the volume where the file shares are, and see the results. So if you're
What was it called again?
ddpeval.exe. So you could get at it. You could download the VHD format and mount the VHD and extract and ddpeval.exe. It's in the system32 folder.
Will it look inside images?
Sorry?
Will it look inside images?
Don't think so. If you mounted a VHD, it probably could. If you mount the VHD as a folder.
Does it have much load in the server?
It would have some load, and that would be how long is a piece of string. That's why you run it outside of your core hours.
Before backups of those.
Yeah.
The actual storage, it would have it on a database or somewhere where it's references.
It's using the system volume information folder, so that's where it's storing the chunks. So how it dedupes is actually pretty clever. It dedupes on a 64K block level, but it's got this very clever nested variable size block thing going on. So say I put two identical 1.6 gig files, which I'm going to be doing in a few minutes. It will actually have a big, gigantic of 64K blocks, but it will actually be the one big chunk that's 1.6 gigs because they're identical. But smaller bits that are common to the previous two, it's still able to dedupe. It does this nesting thing, so it knows that there's identical bits in there, even though they're different sizes. But it works at a 64K block level, so anything smaller than that, it won't dedupe.
Is it based on file name?
Sorry?
Is it based on file name?
No.
So, for example, like,
It doesn't give a damn about file name. 64K blocks. Sorry? Yes. And from the Explorer level, from the disk management tool level, it doesn't look any different. You'll see that in a minute. So I've turned on dedupe there. What I'm going to do is copy that file in there. And while it's doing that, I'll fire up ISC. Now, anyone who's running Windows 8, there is a hack to get dedupe in there as well. If you do a few Bing searches, you'll find the hack to get that working. It makes dedupe available under programs and features. Not obviously, if you're doing a hack like that, there's probably issues about concern or support for that on Windows 8. But if you really have to dedupe stuff on your laptop, you can do it. Not necessarily recommending it, but there are people who are doing it to get the most of their storage space. So I got that file there, and I'm going to copy it twice. I love this new file copy tool. So if I want, I can actually pause one of these copies and let the other one go ahead, and then re-look at it again. And I can see what sort of throughput I'm getting on my storage. This should be pretty slow because for this particular lab, I have 4 layers of nested virtual hard disks. So I have a virtual hard disk and a virtual hard disk and a virtual hard disk and a virtual hard disk.
you're all dynamically configured.
Yeah, and the physical storage is RAID 5 SATA. So anything I could do to get the slowest performance and unsupported is how I have it in my lab. But it's cheap. I spent my money on networking, as you'll see tomorrow. When I say my money, I mean my employer's money. So these are 1.6 gig files. It's the same file there 3 times. And what I'm going to do is, hopefully, get ISC running, and ISE. It's running. Yep. Okay. And what I'm going to do is start dedupe. Start dedupe job. And the drive letter was E colon, minus type optimization. So that's going to trigger a dedupe job rather than waiting for the schedule to kick in. And that is now running a dedupe job. And I can do get dedupe job, or get dedupe job, yep. And I can see the progress of that job. This is going to take a couple of minutes to run. Remember, I've got RAID 5 SATA with 4 layers of dynamic virtual disk, one stored in the other, stored in the other, stored in the other, stored in the other on the RAID 5 SATA. So I've got the slowest possible storage configuration that I could possibly have without having another nested VHD. And that will run for a few minutes, and then we will come back to it. Remind me to come back to it, because I don't want to sit here going, da-dum-de-dum. So we will come back to it to see how it works. Let's have a look and see what a friend of mine in Belgium got from this. It's another MVP by the name of Didier Van Hooy, working hard in IT, WordPress.com. There's a lot of cool stuff about networking and storage in Windows Server 2012. And he's at Working Hard in IT on Twitter. He works for a government organization in Belgium. Lots of storage. 3 Dell Compellent SANs. And those ain't cheap. And the organization he works for has lots and lots of data. And he wanted to back it up. He's using all this cool storage space stuff for his backup volumes. He didn't go out and say, give me the off-the-shelf backup archive appliance, because he looked at the price and said, that thing is just way too expensive. I'll get a server, put JBOD on the back of it, do storage spaces, create file shares on that, and back up to my file shares. And to save money, I'll turn on dedupe. And this is a dedupe results of dedupe on his shares where he's storing his backups. He has 88% deduplication. He has saved his employers a whopping amount of money. And as a result, he gets business class flights to conferences and stuff, because he has saved his employers a ton of money by doing this, and in return, the Belgian taxpayer. He just didn't take what the salesmen were granting him. He said, I'm going to have a look at what my possibilities are, and as a result, that's what he's getting from it. And that, I think, is absolutely fantastic result. Now, hopefully, we'll see how my job is at this point. And 250. It's at 66%. And I want to really wait for it before I move on. So remember, I stored, it's done. I stored 3 1.6 gig files on there. When we did that the other day, that was whatever. Well, let's call it 5 gigs, roundabouts. I can't do maths, which is strange for someone in IT. So what I'm going to do is get dedupe status, if I can, and run that. And that is telling me I have saved 4.36 gigs on my storage with that dedupe job. If I have a look at the volume itself, and computer, I can see that there is 0.01 of a terabyte used, but we'll have a look at the properties to see how much storage space it says is there. I have used 2.02 gigs, even though there is a 1.6 gig file there copied 3 times. So I've saved a whopping amount of storage space by running that dedupe. a checkbox that's built in. All I had to do was enable the role service for deduplication, check the box, and I've saved my employer a ton of money.
This is probably not to do with this particular version of deduplication, it's probably more to do with the concept, but that surely doesn't work within PST files. PST files are a large problem for us.
PST files should never be stored on a file
I know.
server.
It's not a support. It's not a. It actually isn't a supported configuration. That's why they cause Outlook to crash so often.
Yeah.
So the actual model of how the PST file is created is part of the reason why.
Yeah.
It also loads up a thing called dynamic cache in Windows, which screws your file server some considered you keep that way. So it's not a it's an Outlook thing.
Yeah.
rather than-
I don't know anything about PST files and dedupe. I don't know anything to say that you can't. That'd be one of those run your favorite search engine type things. Unless there's anything specific to say you can't, then I could imagine that there would be significant results with lots of identical blocks within those PST files.
Yeah.
It's not really data at rest, they're all open by definition.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so they're never at rest.
That's what's striking me.
Yeah. But your other stuff that is at rest, you would be able to dedupe.
In terms of, again, going back to the finding photographs, we would back up several different customers' photographs up, which is 40 or 60 customers at the time. And in the My Docs folder, obviously the photographs, if they're all taken with the same camera, same file sizes, same file names.
There's a good chance you're going to save a ton of storage space. Funnily enough,
Obviously the photographs will be different.
when you get down to the 64K block level, you'd be surprised how much duplication there probably is. A lot of Didier's data is actually photographs. He works for a geographical information service company, and a lot of their information, their files, is actually aerial photographs. So you'd be amazed how much, when you get down to the 64K block level, it'd be quite a lot of duplication in there. Then when you take 20, 40 photographs and zip them up, your zip files tend to be bigger than the cumulative amount of data. I know that from personal experience. But when you start talking about terabytes at the 64K block level, there's a good chance. But the only real way to find out is run ddp eval.exe. And that'll tell you.
Sorry, is it NTFS dependent?
Yeah. Good luck with FAT32. I think that might be a little bit out of support at this point. When was FAT32 last in a Windows OS? ME edition? I think it was Windows ME. Windows Miserable Edition. That is not my term. I'm just quoting someone else. I actually ran it and was quite happy with it.
If you were backing up a dedupe volume with third-party backup software, is there
It should be fine, because in the end it's basically browsing the file system. So it should be fine. There's a small penalty for using the files, but the penalty is like single percentage points, that sort of thing. And when you think about file servers, where you're doing this sort of thing, this is end user file shares. The disk is not the bottleneck. The network is the bottleneck. So the file server, if I was deploying file servers for end user stuff, I'd be using RAID 5 SATA, to be quite honest, typically. Because it's cheap, it's big, and the network is my bottleneck, not the disks. I'll give you an exception to that later.
After recovery, whenever it crashes, it blows up, you pull the hard drives out of it to try and retrieve data that you've needed, and you don't have the dedupe information.
I do not have the dedupe information is in the file system. So if you're popping the drives back in, this
To a different system.
if they're popping them in the right order, and you're getting your LUNs back, and the volumes are there, you should be okay. Well, then your volume was screwed anyway, so dedupe has nothing to do with it. Your LUN isn't there anymore, so dedupe has nothing to do with it. You've popped new disks as far as that server is concerned. So I hope you're backing up. You might want to take a little pen and write the disk numbers. So if you are moving them from one server to another. Okay, so that's dedupe. Anyone think that is of value? Come on, it's free. It's going to save you a ton of disk space. when we've presented, myself and Dave have been doing a road trip last week, showing this to people. This is just, it's money. It's a real money saver.